We live in pre-war times, says Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk. Indeed, international tension has never been higher since the Cold War. The Russian President Vladimir Putin is prepared to put his finger on any button, including the red one, to spread fear, panic and horror in Europe and across the Atlantic. That's his plan, and it's working. Fear always does. But the question is, are they real threats or just a sign of desperation from a losing autocrat? Welcome to our TVP World studio in Warsaw for our monthly debate. Thanks for joining us. I'm Grzegorz Nawrocki and this is my co-host Małgorzata Bonikowska from the Center of International Relations.
World War III has already begun. It's not me saying that, it's Valery Zaluzhny, the former head of Ukraine's military. Powerful statement and hopefully a wake-up call.
But for many ordinary citizens of the European Union, especially those living further away from Russia, it really seems distant and unrealistic. After all, we're protected by NATO Article 5, one for all for one.
Well, for one thing, we know that the peace dividend is over. The strongest military alliance in history is now challenged by the imperialist ambitions of Vladimir Putin.
The Kremlin leader is ready to risk a lot to restore Russia's influence in the world and help him hold on to power at home. But is he really ready to risk a full-scale war with a NATO state? When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the Cold War ended and Europe felt a sense of security. The world entered a unipolar moment with the United States as the dominant superpower. With the largest economy, the biggest military and a defense budget unmatched by any other country, the US maintained 750 military bases worldwide. NATO, once a symbol of military alliance, transformed into a peacekeeping force engaged in operations across the globe. Russia, weakened by the fall of the USSR, was no longer seen as a threat, and Europe enjoyed a so-called peace dividend. 3 decades later, the global situation is far more complex. While the US remains a leading power, new players have emerged. China, the world's second-largest economy, continues to expand its military budget. So does India and South Korea. Meanwhile, Russia has reinvented itself as an imperial force. Under Vladimir Putin, it has dramatically increased its military spending, reviving its former military might. When Putin assumed power in December 1999, Russia's military was smaller and weaker than during the Cold War. However, by 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea, it had built up a formidable force, increasing its military budget more than tenfold. By the time of the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, Russia's army numbered over 1 million active soldiers, with approximately 200,000 positioned near the Ukrainian border. Today, roughly 40% of Russia's economy is dedicated to its war effort, a sign of long-term commitment to military aggression. While the US remains a dominant force, NATO countries like the UK, Germany and Poland have significantly bolstered their defense capabilities in response to Russia's growing military threat. As Putin pushes forward with his ambitions, the key question is, how far will he go in challenging the West? If diplomatic negotiations, such as those involving Donald Trump, take place, will the US intervene to prevent further escalation in Europe? Or will Putin's actions lead to a direct confrontation with NATO? Well, time will show how this global crisis unfolds. But we have an excellent set of speakers tonight to make predictions and guide us through the details of this crisis. But before that, though, let's take a dive in some background, Małgorzata, and see the potential on the side of Russia, on the one hand, and on the side of NATO alliance.
Let's start with money. You know, we cannot do anything without really money, and especially if we want to defend ourselves. So let's have a look first as when we take into consideration all expenditure for defense and military in the world, you see who is a leader, a hegemon, the United States. 37% of the total. But China is also quite important. And then see Russia, just 4.5%. So nothing to compare with Russia. Where is Europe here? Well, a little here and there, but when we count Poland, 1% and 3%, Italy, France, Germany here, right? When we calculate all this, is 8%. EU countries, not bad. Then we have United Kingdom, 3%, and other countries which are allies to us, like South Korea, Japan. So altogether, we are definitely at the level of China, maybe more. If we add to the United States, it's really a powerful thing. Now, let's look at GDP. GDP is something we know all very well because we discuss it. In NATO, you have this level, 2% of the GDP we have to spend for defense. Poland is almost 4.5%, heading towards 5%. But look, top 10 countries. You will not find Europe here. You find Ukraine on the top. Why? Obviously, it's a war, so relatively small GDP, low GDP, but high percentage on money spent for military. It is including our own money also. Please don't forget that. But money is not all. Let's see what we have. Let's see weapons. Let's see tanks. Let's see the potential.
This
NATO,
is a very clear comparison, yes.
Yes, NATO is yellow and Russia is red. As you see, not bad in soldiers. We have fighters, we have destroyers. We are leading in these categories. We have certain problems with the tanks here, less. And then nuclear warheads, similar. But this is just a statistic. So we don't know precisely until the war starts how much this is worth, on an operational level. So let's see how we can calculate the power. We have an index showing us, a very well-known index with 60 different criteria, the global firepower. It shows us top 25 powerful armies, powerful countries as far as defense. Not surprisingly, the United States leading, Russia, China, India, South Korea. Poland, number 21. So we are not bad. See, Ukraine. Ukraine now is really powerful. Same level as Israel. Obviously, why? Because they have war. So the army is tested in the battlefield.
So, Małgorzata, when Vladimir Putin describes NATO, as he did some time ago, and that's a quote, a blatant anachronism needed by the United States to dominate its zone of influence. Is it because he realizes it's so strong that it can deter Russia, or quite the opposite? It's so weak that we can play a mouse and cat game with it?
Well, Putin says many different things, but I think the reason is always one. He wants to test us, he wants to threaten us, he wants us to feel that we are afraid. And I wouldn't pay so much attention to what he says, every single word, but I would really analyze every single decision he's making.
Thank you very much for this insight, Małgorzata. In an era of hybrid threats, the very definition of an attack is also changing. Sabotage, cutting undersea communication cables, all of this is below the level of conventional warfare. But for this debate, we really mean an open conventional attack, just as we saw in Ukraine or in Georgia beforehand. And countries like Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia are most at risk. So the motion tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is Putin will never attack a NATO country. And let's hear what both sides have to say about it. And please join me in welcoming our guests tonight. And for the motion, Dr. Beata Górka-Winter, defense and security expert, Warsaw University, author of numerous publications on NATO and EU security. Welcome to the program. Against the motion, Janusz Onyszkiewicz, former Minister of Defense, also member of and Vice President of the EU Parliament. Welcome to the show. Please take a seat, Minister. Professor Agnieszka Legucka, Polish Institute of International Affairs. For the motion, Russia specialist analyzing Russia and NATO relations. Welcome. Good evening. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, against the motion, Rafał Bauer, Polish entrepreneur and blogger focusing on wars and conflicts. Good evening, sir, and please take your seat. Now, And for the summary of this debate, when it's almost over later on, we're going to Rome, in Italy. Dr. Stefano Marcucci is joining us live. Welcome to the program and thanks for sparing us some time. Dr. Marcucci.
Dziękuję. Thank you for having me.
Hello.
It's a pleasure.
Dr. Marcucci is a professor at the Italian School of Advanced Defense Studies. Welcome to the program. Well, the audience has voted just before the start of the show, and the results are the following. It's 28% for the motion and 72% against the motion. We'll see whether that will change in any way after we conclude this debate. So we start with an opening statement from each of the speakers, 2 minutes for each opening speech, and Beata Górka-Winter asked first.
I'm here to argue that Putin would never dare to attack NATO. Why? You very often hear from media that Putin is really preparing for a massive attack against the alliance. But taking into consideration that NATO has been and still is the most successful alliance in the world's history, with robust military, with robust conventional forces, which makes it like conventional deterrent, with nuclear forces, so nuclear deterrent. Moreover, we have North Atlantic Treaty with Article 5, and of course you may argue that that's only a piece of paper which means nothing, but that's actually not true, because over the last decade we made everything possible within alliance to make this Article 5 credible. We have military exercises that was defended this year. Since February till May, 900,000 soldiers were exercising different scenarios against the possible Russian attack. Also, we have nuclear forces, nuclear exercises that was known when every year NATO is exercising the scenario of possible nuclear attack. So it's not only that we discuss in NATO, in North Atlantic Council, possible scenarios, but also we are preparing military very often. These exercises are more and more often since Russia invaded Ukraine. Moreover, apart from NATO, we have, which is very important, we have United States in NATO as the country which the most powerful military capability projection. So
thank you very much. Thank you very much, Beata. It's just the beginning of your argumentation. We'll continue it later on. Now the arguments from for the opposite side. Janusz Onyszkiewicz, please.
Since the time of Peter the Great, that means from the beginning of 18th century, one of the main goals of Russian politics was to control Poland. The reason was quite clear. Russia considered controlling Poland as a major element of Russian security. But moreover, controlling Poland, Russia could cast a long shadow over Germany, and this way will be a major player in European affairs, and at that time that meant also in world affairs. But this is not only the only problem which Russia presents to us. Another goal, which is quite clearly formulated by Putin and was always present in Russian political thinking, was to gather all territories and people who belong to what they claim to be a Russian world, to be really members of Russian civilization, maybe not being aware that they should be members of this civilization. But you know, Russia's role and mission is to bring them into the same sort of mold. That's why Russia was always imperialistic, and it looks very much that today Russia is back on its very classic traditional imperial track. What methods Putin will use to bring these goals to the fruition? Well, that remains to be seen. But it looks very much like that Russia will use the standard methods. Will that be an outright attack, full-scale attack? Well, to be honest, that's not very likely. But Russia could do something and could try to soften NATO, soften neighboring countries by smaller actions, smaller attacks, just to show them that unless they will sort of yield to Russian goals, they will be in trouble.
All right, thank you very much, Minister Onyszkiewicz. More to come in the course of our discussion, and here's Professor Agnieszka Legucka for the motion.
In my analytical life, I never say never, because everything can happen, and especially when we talk about Russia. However, we need to do everything to make it never in our life, in the reality. I would say Russia will not attack NATO country yet, because there are several conditions for us to be stronger alliance, and especially that Putin made us stronger. And after the collapse of Soviet Union, NATO was struggling with the definition what to do, where to act. So we were conquering or doing everything out of area, operations out of area, in the Balkans, in Afghanistan, and elsewhere. But the main reason why NATO was established was exactly common defense. And actually Putin made it for us to realize the substance, the fundamentals elements of NATO. That's why when we think about perspective of Russian invasion to NATO, we need to realize that Putin will never attack if we will be strong enough and will be capable to defend our land, this area that we need to protect. And Russia is a weak country. It has strong political will against the West. It is on war with us already. But we talk about today the military attack on our territory. So we need to do everything to this never be always never. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You didn't need a reminder. And finally, Rafał Bauer against the motion. The floor is yours.
So Putin will definitely attack a NATO country just because he did already attack NATO. Anybody who could carefully read his manifesto issued in 10th November 2021, in the very eve of the war, that was clearly stated that the goal of Russian Federation is to regain control of the former Soviet zone. So those conditions were not acceptable for the US Department of State, and it led clearly to the military conflict. And one could say that it's a pure example of a Clausewitz's thesis that war is just politics run by the different means. So after more than 1,000 days of a military conflict, we can be sure that Russia is very well motivated and dedicated to achieve her goals. And in the same time, United States is not very eager to destroy its military might. So what can happen once it's going to be followed by more reluctant Donald Trump administration? It will definitely lead to a kind of ceasefire, and then we will see another threat coming very closely to borders of Baltic states. And then it's going to be another chance for ultimatum, which is going to be same clear that Russia is demanding same, which is its own zone of control. By the way, some of you who could have a chance to learn modern history of Europe, they definitely heard about the 4+2 agreement held in 1991, which ended up Second World War effectively. So in that agreement, nobody promised United States an expansion of the scale which we benefit as the countries like Poland. So effectively the buffer zone between the Western Germany and Russia was fulfilled by the NATO with its power. And now it's a moment we will check whether the NATO is really unified or not.
Thank you very much. Rafał Bauer. Let me just start this part of the discussion that we're going to have now with a short clip from a talk that I've just had with General Ben Hodges, who's a former commanding general of US Army in Europe. General Hodges agreed to talk to us, even though he's just been through a medical treatment. You will notice what I'm talking about in a moment. So let's take a listen.
I don't see an attack on a NATO country, not in the traditional sense. I don't think that the Russians really want to attack that, but they would if they sense that we were not prepared or would not really react. That's what they're looking for, these cracks. And so the activities that we're doing now, all of us, it's not just about Ukraine. This is about our own defense.
All right, they will attack if they see we are unprepared and not ready to react. So today, do you think we are anywhere near being really ready to respond in a proper way and promptly? Defense Minister, to start this.
Well, the problem with our military might, by our I mean NATO, is that it is very poorly distributed. The main bulk of the military capabilities are in the United States. If you look at the tanks which we have in NATO, and we have more than Russia, but where are they? They are in the United States, they are in Turkey, they are in Greece. They are not in the center.
In other words, we're not ready, are we?
In other words, at present, we can be seen by Russia as weak. And, well, Russia hopes that we could be easily divided.
Right. We're seen as weak, but are we weak?
Well, I do hope that we will be able to manage, but that will be.
And that doesn't sound like we're strong.
Well, I think that, you know, we are not as strong as not to tempt Russia, not to attack us all in sort of on full scale,
right?
But to probe us here and there, especially in the Baltics.
Okay.
Actually, we are more ready than ever. NATO indeed was engaged in out-of-area operations for many years, but it withdrew from Afghanistan in 2014. So, and this time Russia attacked Ukraine, and before 2014 Russia attacked Georgia. So from that time we started to change the strategy and the approach of the alliance, because for many years it was only terrorists and war on terror.
We are
more concentrated. We did a lot of exercises. We are purchasing armament not only in Poland. There are huge purchases of military equipment, but also other countries are doing their modernization, professionalization programs. And also more than 20 countries now achieve a level of 2%, which was very difficult.
Yes, we're heading in Poland. We're heading for 5, really. So we're doing very well on that part. But General Hodges mentioned cracks that the Russians are. What are, in your opinion, what are the cracks that they would be looking for? The minister mentioned just the fact that we do have cracks. What are they, in your opinion?
As I said, Russia does not have capabilities and potential, military potential compared to NATO. As we saw, not only in money, but also in the military capabilities, they have less of it. However, there has a political will to attack us with the psychological operation, disinformation, propaganda, etc.
To scare us, basically.
To scare us, to make us weaker, to think about ourselves that we are weak enough to be attacked or to be threatened on the Third World War. Yeah. I think at some part it's worked, but Ukraine is teaching us that even though there were assumptions that Ukraine will lose its sovereignty and independence in face of Russian military potential, it stands 3 years against this huge potential that we are counting on.
Was that phone call from German Chancellor Scholz talking to Putin, was that a mistake? Was that a sign of our crack?
Definitely. We communicating to Russia by strength, not by telephones, because when we are trying to talk with Russia, then they consider it as a weakness, not as a strength.
Well, I think that we shall start with this composition of NATO. So most of jets and tanks are allocated in 2 armies. Turkey and Greece, which are technical and historical enemies.
We've got two new members.
And to be honest, a history of a clash between Turkey and Greece is pretty interesting, and that shall inspire those ones who are so sure that the NATO forces are unified. Plus, just imagine what is the kind of spirit de corps, which is very important to lead soldiers on the battlefield. And imagine that you've got the unit which is combined of Estonians and Lithuanians and Latvians and Polish squad. And imagine that the Lithuanian soldiers will start, or especially Latvian, they will start singing their songs which were driven from Waffen-SS division fighting with Russia during the Second World War. So the sad fact is that Polish army, which is going to be quite is to play a certain role and quite important with potential conflict, historically,
so that
we've been
NATO
allies.
army would be operational, in your opinion?
Well, I'm afraid that you can make a lot of drills, because drills are, let's say, this is not necessarily facing the enemy on the front line. So it's not easy to create the army of such different units.
Now look, but honestly, the situation changed, didn't it, with the fact that we've got two new members of NATO.
And it was made by Putin, right? Because before the invasion, yes, he's the master of enlargement of NATO, right? Because if we would be a neighbor to Canada, probably maybe our calculation will be different than when we have Putin, who runs the imperialistic country.
Does Article 5 of NATO alliance give us security, in your opinion?
Article 5 would never give you anything. The paper doesn't give you anything. But as I said before, we made everything possible since 2014 to make it credible. And America is more here than it was ever before, with American troops on our soil, which is the first time in the history, that we have so much support from United States. Since 2014-17, we have European Deterrence Initiative, which we don't talk much, and I don't know why.
All right.
Because it was $35 billion spent on making Article 5 credible.
Minister, please.
Well, let's remember that during the Cold War period, and now we are more or less going into this situation. There were 300,000 American soldiers in Germany. So it's an entirely different situation. I don't want to analyze, the military situation there and now. What I want to say only is this, that clearly, for me, Russia is not ready, probably, although Putin could do any folly, to make an all-out attack. But Russian might quite well think along the lines which are very typical to Russians. What is ours is ours. What is yours is debatable. So they can grab some territories and then sort of blackmailing us that they may use nuclear weapons. They hope that they will sort of consolidate their game.
Well, that's what they do now.
Yeah.
And that's what they are doing now.
That's the operational mode.
That's why I think that although we are not in a situation when we can have sort of another Third World War, but we may have local conflicts which could be painful. We'll have to address them, and I hope we will. Because, what makes NATO strong is not what is written in Washington Treaty, that, there will be an assistance in a situation the country is in trouble. But what makes NATO strong are military plans, which are fixed and which will be sort of taken into force, when the situation arises.
You're talking about military plans and the security architecture. Let's just hear a word now from Garry Kasparov. I'm sure you know the name. It's a Russian chess master, but for tonight he's rather a political activist. Garry Kasparov.
Putin is looking for much bigger gains that he has now. And for him, this war is not just Ukraine. It's a war against an established world order, which, as we could see now, has been totally, demolished. I think already we know that the United Nations system, and the world architecture of security, became totally obsolete. And it's time now for Europe, no matter what Mr. Trump is going to do, to consider new arrangements.
The world architecture is obsolete and we need new arrangements. What kind of arrangements do we need in 2024 and onwards, in the next decade, let's say?
If you just combine the population of India and China, it counts more than 3 billion of people. So when it's compared with the Anglo-Saxon world, it counts not even 1 billion. So probably we shall start thinking that there are areas in the world way more important for the United States than Europe. So it was repeated several times that our safety is more or less based on Department of State willingness to nuke Mr. Putin.
So our new architecture of security should be based on our own measures taken within the European Union and Europe in general.
It must be, because we just facing the end of European Union itself, with a different interest of the small countries, which can't be even compared with potential of
we just have to
China,
learn each other's songs in different armies and different nationalities.
It's too late.
Yes?
I'm afraid it's too late, because
why is it too late?
Because the idea of states of Europe just died.
I cannot agree.
As we are,
Please.
as we are still countries which are trying to compete with each
Professor
other.
Legucka doesn't
I would
agree with
say that from the beginning of European Union, before that it's named differently, but also NATO, there were always arguments that it will die soon, and it is dying since the Second World War. So hopefully it will die even further, right?
It didn't exist.
It will keep dying, but never
die, because yes, we have interests, like states have its own interests, and I would say even more that NATO or European Union is like a second level of our capabilities, our security. The first thing that a country need to do is defend itself, and then make alliances with others. And our alliance is strong enough at this moment we are talking, that will help us to only upgrade our own capabilities within others. And when it comes to the global order, Putin is saying all the time about multipolar world, right? It means that they want to be stronger, but they don't have they don't have
enough potential and power.
Potential. The BRICS is all the time saying about the dollarization, which is not happening and soon will not happen.
Bruno Karl, head of Germany's foreign intelligence, warns that Russia could attack NATO by the end of this decade, which means about next 5 years.
Well, if we allow...
let me just because the minister has been waiting for quite a long time, and then...
Well, I would say that, I hope that, by the end of this decade, we will be strong enough even for Putin to realize that it will be difficult. Now, I think he has a certain sort of window of opportunity. We are not as strong as we should be, because, this sort of period when we thought that our problems somewhere in Africa or in Afghanistan, and our armies were ready only to confront these problems, not to confront major, and so that will take time.
Okay.
So I think that now Putin realizes that he has certain window of opportunity which he can use, trying to break the unity of NATO, because I think that what is Russian policy, Putin realized that he cannot make Russia stronger, but he can make us weaker. And that's what he's playing on.
And Beata,
well, it only depends.
Before we open the debate to the floor.
If Putin planning to attack us, it is only depending on in what way the war in Ukraine ends. Because if we allow now American administration to make a ceasefire and to stop this war and to give Putin some Ukrainian territories and end the war, then Russia will have time to rebuild, and definitely they will attack us with new forces and new capabilities.
Okay.
So we cannot allow them to do that.
What's your opinion about it? So we're opening this debate to the floor, and please ask questions and share your thoughts.
We have some questions. I just want to say one thing from my side. Just don't forget, Article 5 was used already once, and it was in 2001. because we helped United States, where United States were attacked.
It was the 9/11 thing.
Exactly. So please, who is first? Please introduce yourself.
Please stand up and introduce yourself.
Stand up and introduce yourself.
My name is Michał Szkaradek. I would like to ask a question how the launch of the new military base in Redzikovo may prevent us from the attack. Thank you very much.
Or provoke the attack, if I might just supplement the question. Yes, who would like to answer this?
The Redzikovo base was planned to defend Europe and the United States from attacks from the Middle East. You know, it is not capable really to confront the major, in numerical terms, attack from Russia. So it has very limited capabilities. Obviously, it will help, and it may be sort of developed. But at present, you know, this sort of, you know, defense capability of Redzikovo is very limited.
Politically, not technically, but politically, that's a very serious thing, because this is American installment. And Americans put billions of dollars to build this base. A lot of years, lot of designing and effort to build it. So
but from the Russian side, is it just fear-mongering, or is it a real thing? It is, okay.
Of course it is, because they declared they will attack this base already in 2004.
Okay.
So I wouldn't
It's
put
just
much
the language that they
attention
use.
to that. But politically, American installations, military bases are of crucial importance for Poland, because we believe that Russia wouldn't dare to attack American
We've got another question
installations.
from this part, and then we'll continue over to you. Please stand up and introduce yourself.
My name is Jens Mørk. I'm a Danish journalist. I wonder what will happen if North Korean soldiers will enter from Belarus to Kaliningrad, because then it's not Putin. How do you think that we will act on that? Because Putin is the world leader for making others to make the dirty job.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And this is also leading us to just an observation. It's not only Russia who may be against the West. Just let's not forget that.
is becoming international. Yeah, okay.
I would even say more, that Russia is like military branch for China. Like China also is testing us, our capabilities and our strengths. So if we want Americans keep here in Europe, then we need to consider the idea that it's not two fronts, but actually one front, us against the authoritarian leaders. But answering to your question, Putin is all the time using proxies. The Donbas people, so-called, the separatists, so-called, and others, right, in elsewhere. But I think already that we know that what kind of playbook he has, and how he plays with different type of aggressive actions, including hybrid, because that would be the case. And in NATO, we discussed it, that would it be a hybrid threat challenged by, or like go to the Article 5 or not? There are debates, right, about it. But actually, even when we talk about the border, Polish-Belarusian border, we already in the West are like listened that it's not the migration crisis, but it's actually the hybrid threat towards NATO.
We're finally listened.
Yeah.
But the truth is that we hesitate to engage our own soldiers in the Ukrainian war. We don't do that because we don't want escalation. This works. Putin knows very well that we are afraid of nuclear weapons of Russia, so we hesitate to give a direct help, understood as our forces, our troops, hand in hand with Ukrainian troops fighting Russia. If this happens, Russia wouldn't really have chances, I believe.
Right.
We have a
Any
next
other question?
here.
Yes, from this part of the audience.
My name is Natalia, and my question is: what geopolitical factors prevent Russia from attacking NATO member states? Thank you for your answer.
What geopolitical factors?
I mean, several of it. And we have never been, as a NATO, attacked by Soviet Union and Russia, because they have calculated that they are not strong enough, in a sense that they are involved heavily in Ukraine, right? I would agree with the idea if Russia is still in Ukraine involved, that's why we are helping Ukraine, Russia will not attack NATO countries. So and I agree with the idea that Ukraine Ukraine is only one front for Russia war against the West. And geopolitically, also using of nuclear weapon is something that China would not be happy with. So when we consider the psychological operation against the West, by using the nuclear threat, it is exactly like somehow blocking Russia, like China is blocking
Professor
Russia.
Legucka, how would you assess the possible scenario of Russia attacking a smaller NATO member states? We've listed those states in the beginning of the program, assuming that larger states will be hesitant to respond quickly. Is that a probable, a likely scenario?
Okay, I would answer maybe differently, but very shortly, that from Russian calculus, if we abandon as a West Ukraine, that can happen with any other NATO countries. So we cannot abandon Ukraine, even Ukraine is not the member of NATO, but this element can rise a threat for attacking NATO country, and probably it would be the small. However, still Russia is not capable enough to confront the whole NATO. If we cannot say that we will abandon Estonia because it's small. No, we need to stay united.
Sure. Minister, and then.
Well, it is not unthinkable that Russia may try to recapture part of, for example, Estonia, because the eastern part of Estonia are inhabited by Russian ethnics. So, they can instigate some local problems, and then sending, green, people, not in Russian uniforms, to sort of escalate the problem. Yeah. So, their policy could be to grab something and then hold to it. And this grab could be sort of the result of a certain
and we have
action.
to also stress that Russia is very good in provoking. Like this was the case also in Georgia. You mentioned Georgia 2008. It was just a provocation to enter into a direct conflict. It was a short one, just a couple of days. But Russia can provoke us, and we have to also take
Georgia, Transnistria.
Yes.
Okay.
There are no smaller and bigger countries in NATO. We are unified, and this is treated
for us,
as
but
one,
perhaps not for Putin.
This is treated as one territory, and Article 5 is for the whole territory. So Russia knows very well that once it starts, even in Estonia, which is indeed small, we will come to rescue, and there are already plans.
How quickly?
Very quickly, because regional plans are already introduced lately, and we are exercising
there are some cracks within NATO itself. Look at Orban, look at Hungary,
there are already
look at
NATO
Fico,
troops there.
and the United States.
There are already NATO troops there. So the question is in what time, because they are already there. So they already pre-reacted, yes.
Right. And this is something we have to really stress, that we have soldiers,
yes,
the American, British soldiers, but also German soldiers.
Exactly.
So it's really progressing. We have another question from this side.
Then I will take this part of the audience.
Introduce yourself.
Olga József. We talk about unity a lot today, but actually how confident can we be about NATO's unity if tested by Russia?
Yeah. That was exactly the follow-up to what we have just said. Yes, please.
This unity is tested every day, actually, with hybrid actions. It was already stated here that Russia is doing it every day. Sabotage, disinformation, it was already mentioned. So NATO is reacting on daily basis with a very strong political declaration and also concrete steps against Russia, and also together with the EU, because I would like to underline here that we are forgetting about the EU, which also have vast instruments against Russia, introducing sanctions. It was in the EU capacity. So in concert, they are very strong together.
Mr. Bauer, about the unity. Oh, you like this?
Yeah, that's my favorite concept. Let me ask one question to the audience. How many of you are ready to die for your country? So it's a lot of
We have several
nice
people here.
I see two guys.
Maybe
nice.
you should put it this way, to fight for your country.
Yes, not
That's another vote
not
today.
necessarily
To be honest,
die.
when joining the army, you must assume that that you will potentially die. But it's easy to calculate the weapons. But that's what is proven by the conflict in Ukraine is that the morale of troops is the most important.
But perhaps
and
the
that
answer to
was
this
key.
question would change if we were attacked and if we had
Yes, it is.
foreign
Yes, it
tanks in
is.
the streets. That's
So-
it. It's just a theoretical
So
thing.
it's different for each country. So an attack to Poland would definitely motivate us to defend
Ask
Poland. But
Ukrainians.
I'm not really sure.
Ask Ukrainians about it. They do it.
Yes, they do, but they did defend themselves, and they claim to defend
And
the
we
rest
will
of Europe.
also defend our
But this
land.
is the open question.
Yes, but NATO is ourselves. Although I see your point, NATO is ourselves.
It was said during this meeting that NATO was strong enough to defend Soviet Union, but it didn't won with Soviet Union.
Okay.
Plus, part of Germany was part of Soviet Union these days.
Right.
Asking also Russians, will they defend or fight for their country? And actually, majority of them were saying no, they will not fight. They are paid to fight in Ukraine. They are forced to fight in Ukraine. That's why Putin is so afraid to call another mobilization, because he is afraid of his own people, that they will not be so satisfied if going for war. So there are mechanisms to take them. That's why for North Korea, he had to take people, because he doesn't have that kind of...
Sure. Let me take another question from the audience. Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Alexandra, and I would like to change a little bit point of view, because we talk a lot here about military point of view and state point of view, but I would like to ask you if you think the risk that is coming from Russia to NATO countries to be attacked is significant enough to start protecting and telling citizens that they should be aware of the war and they should start to prepare for this.
Right.
Which is, by the way,
This is what the Finnish do. This is what the Finnish do. This is what the Swedish
because
do.
I started it because we are at war with Russia, not because we want to. Russia is at war with us. So we need to be prepared already for any other, not only military aggression, because exactly Russia is playing
We need to,
with
but
us.
we're not, are we?
We are. I mean, come on,
Oh,
we are
Look,
are
the Finnish
strong enough to hold with Ukraine for the 3 years. If we could only put on the Excel that Ukraine should die after 3 days, but it does not dying, and we are helping them.
Okay, I would have doubts about us being prepared for the war. Minister Onyszkiewicz, are you prepared for the war, maybe?
Me personally? Yes. Well, yes, I am.
All right, okay.
Ministers of
That's
defense have
reassuring.
always
That's
to be ready for the war. That's the defense objective, the defense ministry.
Be always ready. It is true. Well, what really we should take into account is that Russians will definitely try, first of all, to undermine our state. Mm-hmm. That's sort of the Russian military doctrine. According to the Russian military doctrine, using the military force is just the end of a certain process. It's sort of a, something which sort of is the crown of the process. First, you must undermine the country, breaking the morale, sort of instigating some internal problems, and so on and so on.
Okay.
So that's why we must keep unity, and we must be prepared for this kind of actions and prevent them.
Just to supplement your last point, let's hear another few words from Garry Kasparov before we conclude.
We are already at war. So how far the war can go depends on us. But Putin will never stop. So it's very important for us. Sooner better, we'll eradicate the illusion that the major conflict can be avoided for a very simple reason. This major conflict is the only justification for Putin to stay in power.
Agree.
Right. Illusion.
Illusion of war? No, I think that already Putin has started. And I fully agree with Kasparov. He is also mentioning a very important thing, that Russia need to lose this war, definitely. Because only that way they can destroy the imperialistic virus, which is in Russia, unfortunately. But Russia is at war, and Putin is fueled by the confrontation war in the
And just a
biggest
few
sense.
words from Minister Onyszkiewicz.
First, Putin claims that he is at war with NATO, not with Ukraine, with NATO. That's one thing. And the second thing is that we must remember that if we want to have Russia changed, Russia must lose the war. Because Russia changed only after losing some war. That was after the Crimean War, that was after the First World War, that was after the Cold War.
Thanks very much for that. With the recent escalation on the Ukrainian front, major doubts on how the next US administration will react, and ever more aggressive language from the Kremlin, it's time to ask a question: to what extent is the Russian bear ready and able to show its claws to any state protected by the NATO alliance? A wrap-up of today's debate from Dr. Stefano Marcuzzi and Małgorzata Bonikowska.
Yes, Stefano, buonasera. Are you with us still?
Buonasera.
Okay, you followed our debate. We are at war. That's what we are having here as a conclusion. How you, being an Italian and studying and analyzing the war, see this issue? Do you think we are at war? That's what the Italians feel as well?
Now, I think I also need to say that I agree with most of what I have heard, actually. I think both teams have very interesting elements to support their own views. And I think they are both correct in some ways. I think you can say that NATO Russia is not going to attack NATO now or in the near future. I'm very confident about that. I mean, you know, with Russia stuck in Ukraine, the idea of Russia just even thinking about invading a NATO country would appear to be insane, I think.
So you wouldn't say we are at war at the moment in any way at the NATO side?
Well, the motion referred to a direct attack. So that is one thing. But I also agree, which is why I said that both teams are partly correct, that we are indeed at war with NATO. With Russia, or that Russia, to put it differently, consider itself at war with NATO. That's what they say. They say that they are fighting NATO in Ukraine to defend Russian sovereignty and Russian security. So in terms of narratives, in terms of ideology, in terms of what they are actually doing across Europe, you know, the sabotages, the cyber attacks, all the infiltration tactics that they have been carrying out, the pressure they have been carried out against or vis-a-vis political parties across European countries.
Stefano, we are mentioning several times that NATO is not only about military, it's also about political will and decision-making process. How do you see, as an analyst specializing in NATO, this aspect? Are we ready to take action?
No, and that's what worries me. If you look at the history of NATO, if you look at the records of the debates in the Western capitals back in 48, 49, when the concept of NATO was being discussed, the idea was not that a classic invasion of Western Europe was imminent by the Soviet Union, but rather that Moscow would use the mere threat of an invasion to scare Western Europe, terrified by World War II, into political submission. That is, to force them to make enough political concessions to Moscow to make it the dominant power in Europe, replacing the US. So NATO is not about military power only. It's primarily, I would say, about political will.
So I have to ask you in this context, I have to go back to the fact that you are an Italian. What do you see now? What do you feel in Italy right now towards Russia? Is it more an approach to deal with Russia or talk or negotiate, or more to be really tough with them?
As Italians, we don't fear a direct attack or a direct threat from Russia. We are, far enough from Russia. But we do fear two things. Number one, a nuclear escalation. That is considered a serious possibility by large swathes of the Italian public. And I think that's for two reasons. One is that our media system, unfortunately, turned out to be very eager and willing at selling dramas. So this idea of an Armageddon, this sells very well. But it sells very well because it resonates with the experience that the Italian public had of the Cold War. Because Italy is a non-nuclear power, filled, however, with nuclear weapons, of course, managed by the Americans. And so a lot of Italians fear that this makes Italy a legitimate target of a Russian counterstrike.
Many thanks. Many thanks.
Dr. Marcusi, thank you very much for joining us. And now, ladies and gentlemen, time to take another vote with the audience here in our Warsaw studio. The final result after the debate is very similar to what we started with. It's 25% for and 75% against. That's the final result of this debate. Well, history is certainly speeding up. We see it. We don't know how, when, nor on what terms the war will end. But it's clear that the time for big decisions is now, before it's too late.
The European politicians know what's at stake, and they are more and more determined to play the hard game. And it seems that Europe is taking security in its own hands, finally.
Finally. And that's it for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us. This was Warsaw Debate on TVP World. For more content from the region, follow us on tvpworld.com and on our social media. See you next time. Goodbye. Thank you.